two value chain.
I won't mention value chain. So there are two value chains here.
The airport rankings came out just a few days ago, if I understand correctly. And I looked at Schiphol Airport, and I also looked at the ranking of Rotterdam, but the Port of Rotterdam. And I could see that actually in both categories, the Netherlands, the Port of Rotterdam, and also Schiphol Airport are leading in Europe or continental Europe. So it seems the situation is pretty good. So everyone in the Netherlands should be very happy about this outcome. Is this how you perceive the mood in the Netherlands right now?
No, absolutely not. There are a lot of people that are unhappy with the airport because it's too big, creates too much noise, too much emissions of everything, uses up too much land. They are difficulty here finding enough labor, and they are always in need of mechanics, etc. A lot of other staff that is also wanted elsewhere. So a lot of people are unhappy with the airport. And the aviation sector itself is unhappy because they want more freedom, they want to grow, they want less restrictions. So everybody is unhappy.
But as far as I can tell, the restrictions are not getting less, but rather more. This is actually also why we, I think, get together in this podcast, because I saw a post from Wouter on LinkedIn, and you have been in a group basically writing a report for the Ministry of Transport in the Netherlands?
It was for the Parliament, Kim. The commission, the Port Commission of the Dutch Parliament.
Right. So how much time did you have for the report?
Well, we didn't have too much time, Eric, but we needed to give a bit of an overview of the situation and what could be done and what's going well and what not going well. Of course, Eric and I sometimes have a bit of a different point of view, but indeed, Eric sketched it very well about the current state of the industry for the moment, which is somewhat odd. No, I mean, most airports in Europe try to limit the growth and so on. Schiphol actually wants to go down, and that's rather first, I think, in Europe and maybe in the world as well. For the reason that Eric is just mentioning, and for us in Belgium, as we're next door, we're looking at it with somewhat surprise. Because, you just said, indeed, the Port of Rotterdam and the airport at Amsterdam are two huge assets, allowing the Netherlands to play far above their weight. If you live in the Netherlands, you can basically fly all over the world with a direct connection, which leads, of course, to some catalytic effects. Tourists are coming, and, of course, the Netherlands is above average connected with the rest of the world, maybe attracting headquarters and all of that with some additional tax incentives. In Belgium and Brussels, we used to be the number 10 airport in Europe. And after the bankruptcy of Sabina, Brussels airport is only number 26 in Europe. We're looking with some jealousy to the Netherlands. And things the Netherlands wants to reduce, which is a first, but Eric also has a strong view on that. So
Eric, maybe you can share your view. You know, what are your thoughts on what Wouter just said?
Well,
Wouter basically highlighted how beneficial, how strong the Dutch position is when it comes to air transport, and how beneficial it is for the economy.
Well, I think Wouter made one very important remark. Maybe we live above our standing, above our weight. On a global scale, we're a tiny country, and we have this huge airport that we use to transport people from all over the world to all over the world. And then the question is, how much do we benefit from that? And if you look at some of the consultancy reports that were written for the sector, it is always said, so many employment effects, everything is positive, etc. When you look at the academic literature, then indeed you see there may be positive employment effects, but there is this paper by Neil who did the analysis for the United States. If you have a strong hub and spoke system, if you have a well-connected city, and well-connected means you draw that from a hub and spoke system, that can lead to employment effects within the sector. If you have a well-connected city, but you're not a hub, but you're connected to a lot of other airports via direct flights or via a hub, then you can have good employment effects, but not for the sector itself. Well, if that would also hold true for a European setting, then you could say, well, maybe in this case, in the Netherlands, we are actually too big because we are having difficulty filling aircraft with OD passengers. We need all these transfer passengers. Maybe we're simply too big. And the counter argument always is, yeah, without these transfer passengers, we don't have the direct connections. Yeah, true. But if there is no demand for a direct connection, or if there's not enough demand for a direct connection, then you can say, well, thanks to these transfer passengers, we have that, and that's good for the economy. But how much money do you want to invest to have a direct connection, and what is the benefit of that? And that is also why Wouter and I had to go to Parliament. What is cost-benefit analysis? How do you do it? How do you calculate positive effects? How do you calculate negative effects?
What is the share of transfer passengers at Schiphol Airport?
It depends.
About one third.
KLM is much higher. KLM and Partners is much higher than some of the other airlines. And an airline like EasyJet has been rather successful developing its network at Schiphol, but they are European. And nowadays they also advertise with intercontinental flights, fly with EasyJet to Amsterdam or fly from Amsterdam with EasyJet to another airport, and there you can connect to one of our partners.
This is what we call like self-hubbing.
Self-hubbing or...
So, Wouter, you say it's like one third, around 30, basically one
it's
third.
About
around 30.
one third. Yeah, one third of the passengers are transfer, and indeed, it depends on how you look at it. Maybe there are enough passengers for a daily flight to Los Angeles, thanks to the very dense network of KLM. Pick up passengers from Manchester and Birmingham and Düsseldorf and all of that. They can fill that flight. I mean, the good thing is you have a direct flight from Amsterdam to LA, and Brussels we don't have a direct flight. We have to go with the train to Amsterdam, or we have to connect to London or Frankfurt or whatever. It's matter how you measure it. Anyway, what is a fact is that the Mainport strategy, building an airport which can connect Amsterdam with the rest of the world, and building a port logistics-wise that can bring containers from all over the world and oil and all of that and dispatch it over Europe was a big success, and it really added to the connectivity in the Netherlands, and it added to the economic welfare of the Netherlands. But Erik is right. If you balance it with potential negative effects, okay, that has to be calculated. But what I do know is that it's a fact that the passenger flights are a derived demand. So passengers will fly anyway. If it's not to Amsterdam, they will fly through the hub in Paris or Frankfurt or London or whatever. So the idea of curtailing air transport for ecological reasons is somewhat, in my view, a bit of a fake reason, because people will keep on flying anyway. The question is, do you want to have the negative effects? But if you don't have the negative effects, you also don't have the positive effects. And that's up to the politicians to decide. And what is odd is that the Netherlands is the first country moving towards this type of movement, that reducing the number of flights. And that's an interesting case. In Belgium and France and south of the Netherlands, you see this significantly less. And in Asia and in other continents, you don't see it at all anymore. So it looks like the line is the Netherlands, everything above. But you see even Sweden is coming back on this previous scale, the flight shame. You see that's also coming back. So to me, it looks like the Netherlands will be the last one standing in trying to reduce this. Anyway, the other countries, we're opening a bottle of champagne because it will be good for Brussels, it will be good for Paris, it will be good for Frankfurt, because traffic will just move. Rather than
let's talk about the I think there's a lot to say about the environmental effects of aviation, especially in the European context. But there is something I would like to highlight, because you mentioned the 1/3. Let me get back to this one. Actually, I think 1/3 is not very high. I would say it's just, for a hub airport, it can be, is even relatively low. If you look some airports, they have like 70, 80% of transfer passengers, which is much higher. 30% is not, something that is kind of spectacular. It's a normal share, I would say, perhaps even a little bit low for I think Frankfurt, the numbers would be higher. That's what I would think. So I think what I'm trying to say is because Eric, you mentioned that you predominantly want the origin destination passengers, and I think overall on the global scale, I would say the share of transfer passengers is not very, very, very high.
No, but without these transfer passengers, a lot of flights are no longer profitable, and that leads to downsizing the airport. And what Wouter said, and I agree with that, people will want to fly. On the other hand, if you take an airline like KLM that offers very regular flights to Los Angeles, to a lot of other cities, Lima, for example, they fly quite regularly, there simply is not enough demand from the Netherlands itself and from a small area surrounding the Netherlands that could have chosen Schiphol as a direct flight. So they need to pick up passengers from all over Europe. And then the question is, from the airline's perspective, how many flights do we need per week in order to keep this literally in the air, to make it profitable, or at least to recover our cost? And the next question, from a societal perspective, how many flights do we need per week to go to Lima, to go to Los Angeles? And at this moment, if you look at the current situation from a societal perspective, maybe we are overdoing things, and the airlines at Schiphol are doing what is best for the airlines. And they say, yeah, because of that, there is this huge economic benefit. Well, if you go into the details of yield management and who flies where, maybe some Dutch passengers are not even flying directly because it is simply not affordable for them. Because KLM can say, we have yield management and we pick up passengers from other countries. And although that may sound weird, think about the ATRS conference that was in Abu Dhabi many years ago. All the Dutch people that I spoke there, and that was all of them, 10, 12, they flew Lufthansa. That was €1,000 cheaper than flying KLM. All the Spanish people that I spoke to, also 10 or 12, flew KLM. And they paid the same price as the Dutch people paid for Lufthansa. So the added effect of having all these hub and spoke systems combined with yield management means that you're circling around passengers within Europe in order to get them to the hub and then fly to their final destination. And that is a huge waste of resources. From the airline's perspective, perfectly understandable. From a societal perspective, I say it's too much.
I see. When it comes to the European context, first of all, I mean, to respond to to pick up the point that you made about, perhaps there is a waste in terms of, transferring passengers to some places where they could have been served somewhere else, maybe at a lower social cost. This is something I feel, I'm not sure there are some empirical studies trying to quantify these potential inefficiencies. I'm not so sure about that. Of course, when we talk about airline choices, a lot of things are playing a role, which is like frequent flyer programs and so on and so forth, which also should have been, need to be accounted for. But looking at at the fundamentals, I think one of the issues when we talk about Europe and aviation in general, then we have the following picture. Aviation is a fast-growing industry, and it doesn't matter whether it will be fast-growing no matter whether the Dutch government decides to cut some flights, right? It will be growing on a global basis very fast. So this is what's going to happen. And on the other hand, when we talk about the construction of infrastructure, especially in the European context, it's very difficult, right, to increase infrastructure. So this means there will be a growing demand. Infrastructure will remain relatively constrained, which means that in order to accommodate the dynamics, it would be important to make a good use, effective, efficient use of the infrastructure that we have. And if we sort of cut the utilization of a very centrally located in Europe, very conveniently located airport in Europe, that I'm not sure this is a good thing from the societal perspective.
Yes, well, you say a lot of things now that I can respond to. First of all, the restrictions. There's infrastructure, but nowadays there's also labor restrictions. There are simply not enough people to fill all the vacancies that we have in a society, and that includes the usual nurses and school teachers, but also the airlines are having more and more difficulty finding enough people to make it all work. So there can be something that puts another limit on the growth in aviation. And the growth in aviation, we see it happening, but in a country like the Netherlands, it is no longer as fast as in a country like China. So we have, relatively speaking, mature markets, and if we want to grow, we need to get our passengers from somewhere else, China, other markets that are still developing, to fly them to other places in the world, because they're not all going to the Netherlands or Germany or Iceland or wherever you have your hub. So I see that growth. And next to that, if we go back to what I said earlier, if we have so many frequent flights to all over the world, we need to fill that capacity. And how do we do that? Well, if there are seats left, lower the price. So we also sort of create demand with that.
Right.
So growth
Wouter?
Yeah.
Well, Wouter, I see you. You want to have something to say. Actually, I love this discussion because this is unexpected for me. I was thinking we will have we will be three people, we will all be on the same page, but there seems to be some a real discussion going on here. Some being more supportive in terms of the growth and supporting the growth of the aviation industry, and some are sort of are more concerned about that development. So I think that's great, actually. So Wouter.
I understand Eric's point of view, of course, but to me, this is a very idealistic point of view, a somewhat academic point of view, and say he is right. But unfortunately, the economic reality, in my point of view, is completely different. Of course. What Eric is saying is correct. Indeed, that there's a shortage of people in a number of things and all of that. But of course, you also have 2 million people in the Netherlands who are at home because they're sick or they cannot work or whatever. So you could also activate these people, but that's another political discussion. To me, economic reality is people will continue flying. Is it from Amsterdam or from somewhere else? So by being the Don Quixote and saying, no, we need to reduce all of that, that won't happen, because people will fly anyway from Brussels, from Paris, from wherever. The same with the logistics goods. If they cannot come to Amsterdam, they will for sure find another way to get into Europe. One. Two, it still creates economic value. The Netherlands has always been a logistics country, focusing on transfer of passengers, transfer of goods. So to actually curtail that, to throw that away, I think is not a good idea. If the Netherlands does that, once again, the other countries will be happy. And third, I understand Eric's point of view very well about the fact that indeed, if you fly from Amsterdam in a direct flight, you pay more than you do an indirect flight. But that's the nature of the business, no? If you have a direct flight, we had ATRS last week in Hong Kong. If I go for a direct flight, my flight was also twice as expensive as a flying Lufthansa. But that's exactly the business model, isn't it? The value of time. You have a direct flight, you pay more, and for indirect flights, which take longer, you have to step over and so on. That adds time, so your willingness to pay will be lower. That's economics, and that's the nature of the business. If you only have one airline in Europe, like we had Aeroflot in the Soviet Union at the time, you can indeed optimize from that point of view. But it's not like that. We are living in a free world. We have free trade, and that's what's called yield management. But what is a fact? If flying is not sustainable, that's a fact, and the only sustainable flying you can do is not flying for the moment. And it will take at least another 10 to 15 years before we have a little bit more of sustainable flying. We have this SAF, which helps maybe a little bit, but in a way. And the question is, okay, do you want that in your country or you don't want that in your country? And once again, many European countries are looking at big surprise about what's happening in the Netherlands. So I wonder what the effect will be, but I think, Achim, I'm not allowed to say anything because I'm not Dutch. Eric is Dutch. Eric has voting rights.
But wait a second. We are all Europeans. We are all and I'm even based in Hong Kong, and I'm speaking from Hong Kong right now. But we are all Europeans, and we shouldn't be thinking in terms of, I'm a Dutch, I'm a Belgian, I'm a German or French, or I think we should really kind of, embrace our European identity. I think it's very important, especially these days, to push that perspective and not so much the national. I'm not saying that it's not important at all, but I feel having the European view and thinking in terms of Europeans is actually very important. Let me add two things. One is
precisely. Yeah. Can I react on that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. One of the things that I said, I don't know if it was when I was in Parliament together with Wouter or in another session, we are always talking about Dutch policy and Dutch taxation and Dutch limitations on the number of flights. And I'm very much in favor of taxation over limiting the number of flights, but let it be European policy. Because as a country, the Netherlands is small, and we have a rather big airport serving only international markets. There are no domestic markets. Why make this Dutch policy?
But this is what I find surprising. May I just intervene here, because this is something I really wanted to highlight. It's happening. This is what we have. So this is not something we need to wish for. We have the EU ETS. We have aviation is part of the EU ETS. There is a free allowances thing, which has some distributive, means it's beneficial for the airlines, but it doesn't have any climate impact because it doesn't affect the total number of allowances that exist. And I looked it up. It's more than 1 billion. It's 1.3 billion. So the aviation is part of the system. And if the Dutch, if a group, some Europeans decide that they will be cutting the flights in order to save the environment, it's not going to have any impact. If we are talking, especially if we're talking about domestic, if we talk about international flights, like from Europe, extra European, it's a different story, but there are also some different policies in place then. So, but overall, I would say the environmental effect of having reducing flights for European airports, I would say is pretty limited.
Yeah, but then you need to make a distinction between local environmental damage and global environmental damage. And the proposal to limit the number of flights to Amsterdam Airport Schiphol only comes from local damage. And the fact that certain agreements that were made in the past were never turned into law. So when some of the people living around the airport went to court to complain, the judges said,
you're talking about noise, right? If I understand, you're talking about noise, right? That's of course
law
local
that applies here, and that is a law from many years ago. Because since then, nothing has happened in lawmaking, which is a bad mistake by government. So now we're stuck with these old laws. But it is the noise and the fine particles and all the other local potential damage that is leading to these discussions. And Wouter mentioned in Belgium, we're looking at the Netherlands, what are they doing? Well, we do something similar, because when it comes to the health effects of living near an airport around Brussels, I'm told there are far more clever decisions being made compared to the Netherlands. And then based on a report that was written, I think, by a Dutch institute, but I'm not sure about that. But here in the Netherlands, we are thinking, okay, what are they doing in Brussels, and why haven't we thought about that, and why don't we do that? And that all has to do with the fine particles and what have you that is affecting our health. So
that's interesting. So what happened? What happened in Brussels?
Sorry?
So what did they do? Can you be more specific?
I don't know exactly what they did, but it is about the health effects of having fine particles. As far as I'm aware, I'm not into that field of research. I just picked it up in a meeting concerning the negative environmental effects of Amsterdam Airport Schiphol, the local effects. But my point is there are a lot of effects being looked at the moment that were ignored in the past. So in the past we said, hooray for the economy, and the airport has contributed a lot to the economy, but the economy has changed, the aviation system has changed, society has changed, and now we're in a situation where there are a lot of conflicting opinions, and the politicians, the lawmakers, have not kept up with what has happened in society for the past 20 years. So now they need to balance all these different views on how important is the economy, what are the actual economic effects that we're looking at, what are the negative global externalities, how do we deal with that, what are the negative local externalities, how do we deal with that. And now there are a lot of discussions on how to balance all that. And one proposal is, well, let's keep it simple. Let's downsize the airport. And a previous minister of infrastructure said, that's what I want to do. And now we had a new minister, and he said, well, I don't know about that. And our government has fallen and nobody knows what will happen. But it is
Wouter, do you know something about these? I mean, if we talk about local pollution, noise or fine particles or anything, that is something where I would say clearly there would be, by cutting flight movements, definitely you can reduce those. There's no question about that, I would say.
Yeah, but
so it depends on how important do you think those effects are.
Yeah, but in Europe we have the balanced approach. You need to follow, if you want to reduce the output of an airport, you need to follow a very staged approach where you first have to look at alternatives and all of that. And if you isolate or reduce emissions and have new equipment and all of that, and if even that all the things don't work, then only then you're allowed to actually reduce. So the Netherlands has gone through this process. It doesn't win a beauty contest a bit, as Eric is saying, because already going on now 5-6 years, this type of thing. Also, the judges don't help as well. And it's a bit cultural as well, I must admit. Don't be angry at me, Eric, but the Dutch, we call it polder culture. They keep on talking, and then someone comes up with something new, and then the whole circle starts again. And the more south you go in Europe, as you know, Achim, people tend to be more authoritarian, and it has been decided this is the way. And for the moment, indeed, it's complicated. It looks like they will indeed reduce from the 500,000 max to the 478 or 483, what's in a name, based on the historical slots that they have, and put a cap on it. It doesn't work to land there. And what happened in Belgium, indeed, at Brussels Airport, they have this cap of 240,000, and the cap is what the cap is. It can still grow, but there's a cap at a certain moment, and then at a certain moment you have the economics. You have probably the potential crowding out, certain less profitable flights will go out, and all of that. And that's one good thing, at least. The more south you go, the more clear certain decisions are. And I don't understand why the Netherlands can't get their act together with that. But it looks like they will end up somewhere at 478, 483,000 movements. It's movements. So the very funny enough, private flights are excluded, government flights are excluded. There are only the slots, allocated slots. And then you will see what's going to happen, and maybe you will have some slot trading as well as London Heathrow will happen. Maybe KLM.
Is there a discussion about slot trading? Is that something that is a discussion about whether slot trading should be implemented, inspired by the developments in the Netherlands? Do we have some?
It is not disallowed by Europe, but it's also not allowed. For one of the reasons, London Heathrow, it did work, and I think that can actually work. But what you will first see, of course, is that KLM will stop flying to Düsseldorf and stop flying to Brussels, which gives them another 7,000 to 8,000 slots where they can still expand, and that's the economy. So I think it's not bad. You put in a reasonable cap. You keep all the historical slots, and let's go from there. And you will see that the market will do its thing. Maybe EasyJet will maybe sell a number of slots if that is possible to KLM or to someone else. It works well in other countries, so why not? But I understand from Eric, and I agree with that, you cannot keep on growing. The problem is in the Netherlands you don't have many alternatives. Eindhoven is full, Rotterdam is full. You still have Maastricht, but that's too eccentric. You have Groningen, the north is also a bit too eccentric. But in the heart of the Netherlands, there's no alternative. In Belgium, we do have alternatives. We still have Liège Airport, which is for the Walloon people quite central. You have Charleroi Airport, which is a low-cost airport, about 50 kilometers from Brussels. So in Belgium, we still have choice. In the Netherlands, it's full. Full is full. So
there has been this discussion about Lelystad, right? Lelystad
that's another joke. I mean, that's such a joke. They build an airport, and then in the end they say, "Oh yeah, then we have this airport, but we won't open it." I understand why they don't want to open it, but why did they build it in the first place?
So it is an airport that has been constructed but is not utilized.
Now Eric knows
it
more.
It
actually existed already. Yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
It is an airport that existed already, and many years ago, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there were all kinds of discussions at the government level. What should we do? Well, let's develop Lelystad Airport so it can act as an airport that can accept some flights from Schiphol. And we put a very strict cap on that. It's not allowed to grow beyond that. But if we move holiday flights from Schiphol to that airport, or if we move some other airlines from Schiphol to that airport, then we create space at Schiphol. That was the basic idea. And then some of the airlines said, well, that's all very fine, but we are not going to Lelystad Airport because we invested heavily in our network at Schiphol. So we want to stay at Schiphol, and that is where the shops are, that is where everybody wants to go, and it is easy accessible for our passengers, so we don't want to go to Lelystad Airport. And then Ryanair stepped in and said, well, we do want to go to Lelystad Airport, but only if we are allowed to grow. And then government said no, and then there was a huge thing about noise calculations because other parts of the Netherlands would be affected by noise, and then government said, well, we did the calculations and it is not as bad as you think. And then some experts stepped in and said, the calculations are wrong and blah, blah, blah. Like Wouter said, we talk and we talk and we talk. And for decades, we have been afraid to take decisions.
How is the local emissions issue at Lelystad? Are there a lot of people that would be affected by noise and fine particles and so on? Is it less of an issue at Lelystad compared to Schiphol?
Well, less of an issue, maybe not, because you will have different flight paths crossing areas that are now reserved, nature parks, etc., and also cities that now do not suffer from noise, and then suddenly we'll get a lot of new aircraft, and then you get into the difficult discussion on what is the actual impact of noise. Some people live around the airport and more or less get used to the noise. Other people that do not live around the airport are not used to the noise, and they will what's happening. So that is the ongoing discussion for many decades. How do we actually determine the effect of noise? And now it's based on calculations. We have this many flights, and that means this much noise. And for decades, other people have been saying, actually measure the noise, what is experienced, and put a cap on that. And don't let the sector decide that, but go to technical universities, go to
noise
other
budget,
countries.
right? That would be a noise budget. That is something, but it's I don't think this is.
But we have a noise budget, but it's based on the number of flights that we have. And let's forget about that. Would be my proposal. Let's go to some other people and say, if you want to put a cap on the airport, this is how much noise, actual noise, we not calculated noise, but actual noise we accept. This is how much fine particles we accept, etc., etc. And then let the sector figure it out.
Right, and that would mean that if you manage to have more flights with the same emissions in terms of noise and fine particles, then that would not be a problem, right? So I think that would be a flexible approach, which would be, at least allowing for some growth, right?
Yeah, and but the problem is that this discussion has been going on for so long.
Wouter,
Sorry,
I think Wouter. Let's hear what Wouter has to say about this. Also about
I fully
Lelystad,
agree.
right?
Yeah, I actually fully agree with Eric. Ideally, you have a noise limit or noise pot, and you can let the airlines figure it out. But the politicians don't grasp that because they want to sell it, of course. It's not as tangible. Now, if you see so many flights, it's much more tangible. We see the same thing in Brussels Airport. The minister also gave a license for 240,000 flights because that is something you can see, you can actually feel. But I actually agree with Eric. From an academic, theoretical point of view, would be fantastic. But the practical implication, especially the how to sell it to the people around, is significantly more complicated. And that's why everyone stays with the number of flights.
May I say that actually we have successfully implemented such a system in Spirit, which is the EU ETS. This is similar, right? So EU ETS it does not say you can't have this many passengers or that many, energy that you can produce. It says it's the emissions that matter, right? And it's the same logic for noise or fine particles that you could apply. And there is a very big application case, which is the EU ETS, and works. It has been implemented. And I think this is something that, based on the discussion, or it may seem that this is like a sort of an out of the world, it's like an abstract academic idea, but it's not. It's something that we have in Europe at a very large scale. So just use that approach and implement it in other areas, and it's basically the same. And we also see, I feel that it is quite successful, actually, the EU ETS.
Yeah, but then you're back to the noise is a local matter. Why CO2 is more of a global matter. So ETS works very well in Europe. It's a fantastic system. It's also quite objectively measured because you know how many fuel is burned and all of that. The scope is intra-Europe. But noise, the problem is that the positive side is for the whole world, but the annoying part is for the local people, and that makes it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, but the way the mechanism works is it doesn't matter whether you would use it for a problem at a global scale or at a local scale. The way it works is just, that the logic applies no matter how big the problem is, basically, right? It's about we want to cut emissions and then, want to have a flexible system that, really addresses emissions in the first place and leaves all the rest basically open for, innovation, basically, and for the market participants to handle the situation as effectively and efficiently as they can. Right? May I? Because there is. So, Wouter, how about Lelystad? I think you still have the, but you feel that Lelystad is like a sort of you're pretty critical about how it is used right now, if I understand correctly.
It's insane. I think I understand why people say it should not be open and so on. But you have an airport. The Netherlands does not have a low-cost airport. If you look around, all the countries around the Netherlands have a low-cost airport. In Germany, you have a few ex-military airports. In Belgium, we have Charleroi, of course, as a low-cost airport. Also in France, you have, for instance, Beauvais, and in Germany, you have Frankfurt-Hahn and all of that. So Netherlands does not have one. So for me, it would be ideal as a low-cost airport. You actually either free up slots or you still have competition, because if you limit the number of flights in Schiphol, you will see that the prices will go up. For flying from the Netherlands, you have this kind of hub premium which you will generate. So KLM and the other ones will actually increase their price, and by just allowing the people who have less of a financial means, they can, instead of them having to take the car to Charleroi, they can fly from Lelystad. So I think Lelystad should be open. You should of course limit it, but as a low-cost airport, and with sure EasyJet, but definitely Ryanair and maybe TUI Fly will also operate some flights. So I think it should be open. I also think that indeed you cannot keep on growing. 500,000 movements for Schiphol might be too much. You have to cut. It looks like there's like a political equilibrium around the 478,000, which means a kind of small reduction of the current. But you put the cap, then you will have this hub premium and all this thing. You have this optimization going. Maybe you will not fly to Lima anymore. If you think it does make sense, Eric, maybe certain flights to Brussels, to Düsseldorf and all that will disappear. So let the economy work. Let's the market play. But of course, by doing that, you increase the price. That's why I think Lelystad should be open for, I don't know how many flights, 40,000, 50,000. You can increase it
Anything? Any
The whole
direct
problem,
response?
of course, is that noise is a very tricky one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, any direct response, Eric? Is there something left to say about Lelystad from your perspective?
Well, one potential problem is if you open up Lelystad Airport, then Ryanair would go there if they are allowed to grow, and then you move this whole entire growth discussion from Schiphol to Lelystad Airport. And next to that, Ryanair has been very active at Eindhoven Airport, which is an airport that is also used by the Air Force for transport flights. And they have sold that in the past as a flight to Amsterdam. If Lelystad is closer, why wouldn't they move to Lelystad if they're allowed to grow there? And then you're stuck with the capacity that you have at Eindhoven Airport, which is now also used by some other holiday airlines. And also there they are reaching capacity. It is a question of how do you use the assets that you have available and what is the noise effect surrounding that. And that has been a political discussion. One potential solution in the past that was suggested was Lelystad Airport with a very limited number of flights. I think, I don't recall the exact numbers, but far less than what Wouter just mentioned. Only meant to act as an overflow airport for Amsterdam Airport Schiphol. And when I was asked in the past, around 2012, what do you think about this? Well, it's not going to work. And people laughed at me, and now we are in 2025, and it is still open to discussion. And I think we are not very enthusiastic about opening it, because the rules under which it was developed, from an economic point of view, did not make any sense. Just like Wouter said, there is the economy, let economic forces take their course and you will reach an equilibrium. Well, if you don't account for that when you open it, or it's not going to work.
All right.
It's a huge waste of
it's
resources.
not so difficult, Achim, to look into the future now. And we're in a podcast, so we have to make it a bit lively as well.
Sure.
Netherlands, they don't have a government for the moment. It's very clear, and it's great we have Eric here because Eric indeed translates what many people say and think in the Netherlands. So there will be a new election soon. People will probably vote more left than right. You know, things are always a kind of swing. And then they have this extreme right party, but you also have some other parties more in the center. Some other parties are definitely more against the air transport. So what you see, Lelystad will probably not open. Schiphol will probably find somewhere a balance around the historical slots, because once you have awarded the slot, you cannot just take it away. They will cause lots of dramas within Europe and within the United States. So the bottom is about 480,000 flights. So they probably cap it on these historical flights. Everyone will be unhappy or happy, I don't know, kind of happy. Schiphol will become a premium hub airport. You will see some changes in number of flights. Maybe you will have some slot trading. And in a way, for KLM, it's not so bad because you have the hub premium. They can start charging more. Look at British Airways in London Heathrow. And then the low yield passengers will probably move. They probably go to Belgium, to Charleroi, maybe to Brussels airport, although that's not such a cheap airport. They will go to Düsseldorf, to Cologne, to Weze in Germany. That is what is going to happen, and everyone will be happy. Yeah? And the Netherlands will be the first country in Europe doing that. So it's a nice experiment. We will see what will happen. What will happen with the Netherlands?
So do you think others will follow this example?
No way.
Do you see any changes happening or views? Does this policy move inspire other European leaders to do something different? So Wouter, you say this is something we don't observe.
But you have the flight chain, which is still a little bit in the Netherlands, but we see up north, the more north you go, the more flight chain there is. I'm also lecturing in Marseille, in the south of France, where the flight chain among people is zero. And Achim, you lecture in Asia, where they even don't talk about it. So it's clearly something which happens up north. Indeed, it's true in Belgium, we talk about caps and you cannot keep on growing and all of that. But Belgium, and that's the second thing, is we have less flight shame, and the more south it is disappearing. The second thing is we still have airports which can grow. If you look in Belgium, we still have Charleroi, we have Liège, we have Ostend airport, which can still grow. And if needed, quite some Belgians go to Cologne as well, and go to Düsseldorf, and it's 2-3 hours drive.
And we don't have to go as far as Asia, actually. Just look into Eastern European countries. Poland, 20. I looked up the numbers. Actually, at Schiphol Airport, the numbers are below pre-COVID levels, substantially below. Cargo is actually a little higher than what you had pre-COVID. But in Poland, 20% plus, and people are happy. And also thinking about substantially increasing infrastructure capacity by having that new hub for Poland in the Warsaw area, which will be an integrated airport, integrated in the sense that there will be 2 runways. It will be an airport which will also include a high-speed rail connection. And I think people are quite enthusiastic about, the dynamics that are going on in Eastern Europe right now, and they are happy about the growth that they experience in aviation. There is no concern about, So I'm not saying that there are no issues with constructing capacity, because of course there are some landowners and there are some issues around that. But overall, I feel that the attitude or the feeling towards, the growth and the contribution of the aviation industry the perception is very different.
Yeah, I don't know if it's different or.
Yeah, and that's why
dependent on the situation.
Yeah, that's why it's saying the Dutch people. Yeah, but that's why I was saying the Dutch people have to decide. You say, no, we're all European, yes, but it's the Dutch government. The Dutch people vote for the government. And for me, it's a very interesting experiment. It's unique in a way. So, we see what is going to happen. But it will not go to other countries, I'm quite sure. But what you will see, also in Paris for the moment, they're talking about capping the growth up to a certain moment and say, look, this is enough. But it's not degrowth. It's still growth. It's still a perspective. And there's always a plan B, because you have other airports which are still having capacity. So, okay, Eric, it's up to the Dutch people to vote now and see where we will land. And it would be great academic paper for 10 years' time to see what the effects are. Yeah. But I think you potentially throw away one of the big assets that the Netherlands has.
Yeah, well, if it comes to voting, I don't know what to expect, because the center parties are looking at the more extreme parties on the left and right, and what do we need to get our votes back from those parties, and nobody knows. So I really don't know what to expect with the next elections. But when it comes to the airport and the Eastern European case that Achim just explained, I see a lot of parallel with cost-benefit analysis that was done almost 25 years ago, when we're still thinking about expanding Amsterdam Airport Schiphol because it was so good for the economy. And then people were already saying, but we are a relatively small country. In 1996, Amsterdam Airport Schiphol published a document in which they said, in the future, not specified, but in the future, there will be at most 4 major hub airports in Europe, and there is no room for more. And it was the ambition of the airport and the airline and the government back then to be one of those 4, even though people back then said, well, you've got London, you've got Paris, you've got Frankfurt, most definitely 3 of the biggest hub airports. Why would Europe, the European population, want Amsterdam Airport Schiphol to be the 4th major hub airport? And I think
my father definitely wanted. He always says, when he flies to the US, he always said, I want to fly via the Netherlands, Schiphol Airport. He loved the Schiphol Airport. So you see, at least.
But you see how opinions have shifted, because just after Corona, let me say differently. Just before Corona, the idea was, well, we are approaching 500,000 flights. What should we do next? We should allow further growth. And just after Corona, we had a minister from a more conservative party and said, let's downsize. And that switch in attitude came rather quickly and unexpectedly to me. And I agree with Wouter. I don't see this happening very quickly at other major hub airports in Europe, because these other major hub airports have a huge home base that the Netherlands does not have. So for us, it's much easier to say we have a population that is affected.
I remember a lot of Dutch people saying, the London Heathrow, there was a discussion about having a third runway, right? And I know some Dutch colleagues saying, why do they need a third runway? We have a Schiphol airport, and I think you have like 8 runways or so, like a large number of runways. So runway capacity is really not an issue at Schiphol airport. And so if you extend sort of the catchment area to the UK and London area, then that would be... of course, be a
but
big.
That's why in the past we had KLM UK, which now has become part of KLM Cityhopper, and they had more destinations in the UK than British Airways, only to bring people from the UK to Amsterdam so they could fly across the ocean.
Let me say there's the 2 things. Circle back a little bit to something that we have been talking before, and this is about the yield management. Because the way you described it, to me it seemed like, there are the airlines and they are making big money, but historically, the airlines are not really very profitable over time, right? So it's not really that they are the guys that make the biggest money. There are periods in which they are, doing relatively well, but there are also a lot of periods where they struggle a lot. Overall, it's not that the airlines are, very profitable business. I think this is one thing I would like to...
I agree.
That is one thing I would like to highlight. Another is because you mentioned labor. I think this is a very important aspect. First off, the way you described it, Eric, I felt that you were saying, there is a labor shortage already now. But if it would be true for the airline aviation industry, that would mean that there would be a natural limit to the growth that they can achieve. But apparently, it's not strong enough because you would like to go beyond sort of limiting the growth. And it seems that labor is not a major factor here yet. When we talk about airports, there is actually one other aspect that I would like to highlight. I was thinking about how would the future of airports, how would you imagine then in the future? And I was thinking, I was kind of struggling about how will future airports look like. But then I think I have for me, a very convincing picture. And this is humanoid robots. I feel that a lot of the areas where we have labor shortages, especially at airports, they are really well tasked for humanoid robots. So I would think that maybe in 5 years, maybe earlier, we will see a lot of humanoid robots running around airports carrying luggage for the passengers, helping them to find their way, handling the luggage at the luggage handling on the tarmac and ground handling, basically. I think they have a lot of work to do. Of course, this is a little bit some speculation here, but I feel labor shortage, to me, it seems, is something that we will be able to resolve in the future. I don't see this as a...
Yeah, we will be able to solve, most likely, but at what price?
The humanoid robots will be relatively
eventually
cheap.
For ticket prices. Yeah, but you need to make a huge initial investment in order to make it work. And if you look at the current situation where some people need to put suitcases in aircraft, there is already equipment available so that they don't have to lift everything themselves and put it in the aircraft without hurting their backs, etc. But it is expensive, it takes time to operate, and airlines sometimes say, well, we don't like that, let's hurry it up a bit and we want to fly. So there is already equipment that is available that they could use. And I see your point about robots in general, but we are not there yet. And that means that we need to transition. If you want to transition, that means a huge investment. And who is going to pay for that? And the airlines will say, well, that's something that we like. We are not going to invest in developing the necessary software and the necessary hardware because we don't have the money for that. let the government fund that, and then we will use it and we will allow you to fly. Okay. Is that
so
the
what
way
do we
that
think
want
about
to
what
make
do
it
we
work?
I think we have now covered a lot of areas, but if we would try to come up with a conclusion about what does the developments in the Netherlands mean for European aviation, or the position or the development of European aviation in a global context? Because again, I mean, the main, I think something that we know is sort of that the main area of growth is definitely happening in Asia, and what do you think? How important is this kind of transport services for Europe? Should we support it? Should we limit it? What do you think? What is the significance of what's happening in the Netherlands for basically Europe and the world? It's a difficult question.
If I can maybe start, and then we let our Dutchman have the final word. What you do see is that Europe had a very successful European policy. If you look at the consumer welfare, prices have decreased, the connectivity has increased. So if you look at how Europe did, was doing great. Also pushed by the low-cost carriers. But anyway, if you look at European aviation policy so far, things are very good. You also mentioned, Achim, also on sustainability, on intra-European flights. I think there's a very good system, ETS. The SAF refuel EU is a little bit more complicated, especially within 10 to 15 years, but at least the baseline is there. So I think we can tick the box. It is a success. If you look, will it grow in Europe? Yes, definitely. Less than in Asia, of course, but we still have a growth of 3 to 4% per year. We see if the GDP per capita grows, people tend to fly more. And you see the world, even if we have some deglobalization for the moment, you still see that people will still want to fly. And there are no alternatives yet. To come back then to the Netherlands, will it be an impact for Europe? No, I don't think so. You'll probably see a kind of shift happening. But what you do see, and Europe did not do that very well so far, if you look at the US, you look at China, for instance, you have 3 big airlines left who have some oligopoly dominance. They make some high profits, but they're quite strong airlines. In Europe, we still have a very scattered landscape. So you see slowly but surely things are consolidating. You have KLM Air France, which is the third airline. They were not doing very well compared to IAG and Lufthansa Group. So it will not help Air France KLM. That's why they are focusing so much on Copenhagen now, SAS, to have a kind of fallback. They might also try to purchase TAP in order to have something in the south. So Europe will probably now work a bit more on the industrial policy to make sure that we have 3 big airline groups who can compete with the big Chinese and the big US carriers. So for Europe, there will be very little significant. You will probably see a shift. But then to conclude, for me, it's absolutely ununderstandable. And forgive my words, for me, it's madness what is going on in the Netherlands, because it's such an asset that the Netherlands have with this Mainport strategy, just to discuss, to push, let's say, all the morale down about it, to create a fuss. It takes far too long, this whole process, and it's really seriously harming the Dutch aviation policy. So I hope they will come soon to a kind of compromise where everyone is happy or unhappy with, that at least they can move forward. But I think it's a bad thing what is happening for the moment in the Netherlands, and other countries will definitely benefit from it. But for Europe, it will have no impact. That was my short summary. Eric, I think you probably disagree.
Eric.
Well, I agree to a large part. One thing I don't agree with, that what's happening at this moment is madness. And let me explain. I think in the past, aviation policy has been very successful. Mainport strategy, developing hub, etc. And we saw the economic benefits of that. And at the same time, we more and more saw the negative effects of that. And that is why we are now in a situation where we need to think, okay, what do we need to do? And why are we in this situation? Because for the past 2 decades, at least, we have not known what to do. And as you said earlier, what we call polder model in the Netherlands, we speak and we talk and we talk and we talk. and let's not make a decision because we should talk about this. And as a result of that, we are in a situation where we are now. So what can Europe learn from us? Well, basically nothing. Act. Don't talk. You need to make decisions.
But I don't think this is very much of a Dutch problem, actually. I think this is a problem that is also true for other countries in general, actually.
Yeah, but what is the worst thing for any business?
They know how to
uncertainty.
They definitely know, and that's what is process. It's not the outcome, Eric, that's madness. It's the process that's madness.
It's the process that is the problem of the situation where we are now. So now you say it's madness that we are going to that you want to downsize. Why are we in this situation? Why are we in this madness? Because in the past decades, there was no solid decision on how do we measure noise, how do we measure other effects, how do we make policy on that. It was always like, okay, we talk about it and let's not turn it into law because then it is fixed and no way back. Yeah. So let's talk.
May I say something?
Apart from all that, we are in this country where we say, well, we are the Netherlands and we're this big on a global scale. At this moment, you see all this development in Eastern Europe. If what you described, Achim, will be successful, why do we need to downsize Schiphol by law? There will be a competitive effect anyway, because KLM gets a lot of its passengers also from Eastern Europe to bring them to Amsterdam to fly them elsewhere. If they lose those passengers, because there are more convenient connections now in Eastern Europe, that will erode the network anyway.
May I say something?
It is
here,
a competitive game that is being played at a global scale. KLM has in the past often complained about Dubai Airport and how unfair it was that there they get state support and KLM doesn't get any state support, just like Lufthansa, just like so many other European airlines. It is a global competitive game in a global market. And in the Netherlands, we should not think that we are so influential that the whole world is looking at us and, oh my God, what are they going to do there? Basically, nobody cares, I think.
This is really, I feel, a very important statement in the sense that I feel in Europe in general, the strategic importance of transport policies is not well understood. I think this is really something that is, just consider it as a strategic asset. Think about how to develop the policies, optimize the policies. I think transport infrastructure policies are a very important part of our lives. And I do feel that they are not having the proper attention by policymakers. This is also actually everything that we have just talked about sort of seems to be a result of that. It seems to me, that's my perception. Also, actually, when it comes to German policies, for instance. Would you agree with this, or would you say, there are other things that are definitely more important, and therefore it is, it makes sense to put less attention to transport aviation infrastructure policies in Europe?
I actually agree. It's a fact that you see things are somewhat a little bit changing now. Also, what's happening in the United States for the moment, you can see that the European industrial policy is somewhat changing. You see the fact that the European Commission is a bit more open towards these mergers and acquisitions. So yes, but it will take some time, and it's true that aviation policy has been neglected a little bit as far as transport infrastructure is concerned. They were looking a lot about having a free market, having more consumer surplus, having competition, reduced price, increased connectivity, and so on. But they forget, of course, the industrial policy part, and I think that might change over the next couple of years.